Is the Assistant Majority Leader in the House? Durbin! Durbin! Durbin!
Senator Charlie Woods, Mr. Wallace, good to see you again, sir. Yeah, thank you for all your support in the Great Lakes. You've been wonderful. Real champion.
We're trying to kill that damn Asian park.
Absolutely, absolutely. We're doing a good job.
Absolutely. Good. So you're going to drive or you want
to drive?
All right.
Go ahead.
We'll have you drive.
I'm really glad you're here.
Do you have a son?
No, I know you had some issues.
Coming for the rematch.
I won't run you over.
I'm glad I don't see any golf clubs in the back of there. Big wave goodbye!
Conservation District was on the interagency planning team with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service for the purposes of the environmental assessment. And during that time, we pledged our assistance as a district to assist with natural resource information in our ecological database, to provide on-the-ground support should a refuge be established, with help with management of the site, office and meeting space, collaboration with educational programs, and then of course one key piece was working to accept conservation easements to keep critical recreational corridors for snowmobiling or other recreational activities alive and well, to preserve that within the county. But that's just what the district has said, and the partners are all bringing different things than you're going to hear about. But I today want to stand by our enthusiasm to support the refuge and with the partners to make those promises happen. So without further ado, as they're back, it's my pleasure to introduce our honored guest, Secretary of the Interior, Ken Salazar.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. This is a wonderful place, crown jewel for this part of Illinois and for Wisconsin, and it's my honor to be here on behalf of President Obama to talk just very quickly about our America's Great Outdoors project, and then to make an announcement here on the Hackmatack National Wildlife Refuge. The first is just to give you a sense of where the President has been going on the conservation agenda. We recognized a long time ago that what we needed to do was to move forward to create a 21st century conservation agenda. And so the President brought in hundreds of leaders of conservation from around the country. We had an all-day meeting, and out of that came many of our major initiatives, which we continue to implement all around the country in all 50 states and out into the shining seas of America. And here in Illinois, the Millennium Reserve is one, and Hackmatack is another one of those priorities under the President's umbrella of America's Great Outdoors. I said a little earlier that some of our priorities fall into, I guess our priorities in the conservation arena fall into three categories. The first are the landscapes of national significance. Certainly the Great Lakes are one of those landscapes, the Everglades in Florida, the Crown of the Continent in Montana, Wyoming, the Bay Delta in California, and so many of these other landscapes that truly define us as a nation. Secondly, moving forward with the creation of a new era for the celebration of the rivers of America through the creation of a national water trail system, a national blueway system, and investing in rivers such as the restoration of the Elwha Dam and Elwha River in Washington, where for the first time in history you will have 70 miles of the Elwha River in Olympic National Park now opened up to salmon in the Pacific to be able to get up into their native habitat, a very important initiative not only for conservation but also for the Native American communities who share the Elwha River there in the state of Washington. And in the Penobscot in Maine is another example on our work, Senator Durbin, that we're doing on rivers. We are in the final stages of completing but will be a 1,100-mile river restoration of the Penobscot River, which will open up the Penobscot from the Atlantic all the way up to its headwaters for 1,100 miles. So we have a major focus on rivers. So national landscapes, the major rivers of America, and then finally our work around what I call great urban parks and wildlife refuges. And we're working on these kinds of projects in places like New York City with Mayor Bloomberg, where the 27,000 acre Jamaica Bay will now become accessible to the 18 million people who live in New York. And in places like Albuquerque, New Mexico, and the surrounding areas, restoration of 180 miles of the Rio Grande River will be one of the great urban wildlife refuges in New Mexico. In Los Angeles, on the Los Angeles River, in my native Colorado, and the Rocky Mountain National Park, Rocky Mountain National Wildlife Refuges, the same kind of activity is taking place here. And so it's in that category that I see the Hackmatack National Wildlife Refuge, a great urban wildlife refuge for the United States of America, but most importantly for the local community and for the people of Illinois and for the people of Wisconsin as well. Because it is here where many millions of people will be able to come and understand the importance of the connection of humanity to the land and the water and the wildlife. As we were driving around with Ed, he said the earth tells a story, and the earth can rebound back in ways that we have seen in this place. It's a very important part of our earth here and a very important critical part of this bi-state area. And so it's been an honor to work with Governor Quinn and with the leadership of this community to designate this as one of the priorities for the America's Great Outdoors. You know, a year ago, at the President's direction, we met with the governors in all 50 states, and there was no doubt when we came and met with Governor Quinn here in Illinois that the two most important priorities, the most important projects that we could work on for him were the Hackmatack area and the Millennium Reserve, and I'm proud that we are working on both of them. So today it's my honor to come here to inform this community that we have signed off on the final documents that will make this the 557th National Wildlife Refuge in the United States of America. As I make this announcement here today, I want to make a couple of critical points. The first is we should never forget the connection between what we do in conservation and economics. Jobs are created through outdoor recreation, whether it's hikers, bikers, anglers, hunters, watchable wildlife, all these programs. Outdoor recreation brings in excess of 6 million jobs a year here in the United States. Economists, independent economists tell us that this is an area of huge growth for our economy. So as we struggle to bring this nation from a place where it was at the brink of a second Great Depression to the kind of economic wherewithal where the President wants it to be, where we all want it to be, it's important to remind ourselves that conservation truly is about jobs. And as we were going around with Sarah, who's a small business owner, she was talking to us about how her small business is so dependent on the outdoor recreational activity. Secondly, it's important for us to also recognize the connection to health. And when you think about what First Lady Michelle Obama has done in her initiative on Let's Move Outside, it's about making our people and our communities healthier, and people who are in the outdoors are much more healthy. So we need to continue to push for conservation and outdoor recreation on that end as well. And the third point I wanted to make here this afternoon is we also are very much at a crossroads. Crossroads as to whether or not the conservation agenda, which we have here in the United States, which is treasured and envied around the world, treasured from the days that President Teddy Roosevelt said that conservation was going to be important for us in this country, when at a time that the forests and rivers were being created made into wastelands in America almost 100 plus years ago. He stood up and said, no, we're going to protect the very special places of our country. Well, it takes investment to make some of this happen, and so many of you have been great leaders and fighters for the Land and Water Conservation Fund, for the North American Wetlands Conservation Act, for many of the funding streams that support these kinds of conservation initiatives for our country. We need to make sure that we continue to push for those investments in conservation because silence will essentially mean that conservation will frankly not be funded in these very tough fiscal times. I will tell you that the President has stood strong as a leader in conservation for us as he has moved forward with efforts to have the Land and Water Conservation Fund fully funded, making sure that we are putting money into NAWCA programs and other programs that are important to all of us. So watch what happens in the months ahead, because in so many ways the conservation funding programs are very much at a crossroads. I mentioned this to Senator Durbin and to Ed as we were out on the tour, that there was an effort just in the last several months where two of our great senators from Montana and New Mexico tried to move forward with a $1.4 billion investment into Land and Water Conservation Fund. It got 74 votes out of the United States Senate, a bipartisan vote. But somehow over in the House of Representatives, there are people who said that those kinds of investments were simply not worth it, and they took that money out, so we didn't get across the finish line. If that money had come to the Land and Water Conservation Fund, I can tell you that the great vision that you all have to complete this National Wildlife Refuge, we would have been able to have done it right now. Okay? But that's the kind of fight that takes place in Washington, D.C., and we got to make sure that people don't lose sight of what is important to local communities when these decisions about funding are being made. Now, finally, let me introduce my good friend, United States Senator Dick Durbin. Yeah, I've worked with a lot of people in Washington, D.C., and D.C. is one of those areas where you don't, frankly, make a lot of friends that will stay with you for life. Our good friend, Senator Ted Kennedy, used to say, if you come to Washington, D.C., and you want to have a friend, what you ought to do is you ought to get a dog. And by and large, that is true in Washington, D.C. I can't say that I have a lot more friends in Colorado. In fact, I have more friends in Illinois, I think, than I do in Washington, D.C. But I will tell you that Dick Durbin is different. He is a senator's senator. He's a leader in the United States Senate. He cares about people, and he cares about this nation like very few people do. And I have watched him work on some of the most difficult political issues that face our nation at this time. And he always transcends the divisiveness and the sense that somehow Washington is stuck and finds a way to move forward. He did that this morning as a participant in an effort that he has long championed on the DREAM Act for young people who deserve an opportunity to live the American dream, who are living that. And I think in the actions that he has taken just on that one agenda, it's not a conservation agenda, but it's certainly a huge agenda for our country, that you see a person who really is a statesman for all of America. And I'm just so proud to be able to introduce to you the Assistant Majority Leader, the United States Senator from Illinois. Not Barack Obama, it is Dick Durbin.
I miss him. I really do. I wish I'd have brought my tape recorder out. I didn't know it was going to be that good. But I do miss him. Ken Salazar was a great colleague. He didn't have time to share his life story with you, but it's a wonderful story. It's a family story. It is a piece of history. It's not a piece of American history. It's a piece of history that transcends this nation, because the Salazar family came from Spain 400 years ago to what we call America, naming mountain ranges in New Mexico and Arizona and Colorado, and becoming an integral part of the development of this nation into a nation. And so when Ken Salazar speaks of his commitment and heritage, it's genuine. And I know from personal experience how much we treasured him in the Senate and missed him, seriously still missing in the United States Senate. But he's off serving the President, the Cabinet, done a great job. Ken, we are honored to have you in Illinois. Thank you. Ed gave us the tour, and I said, how did you get mixed up with this? And he told me the story, which I guess I could share. Coming from Humboldt Park, going up to Lake Geneva, buying the old canoe for 25 bucks at a garage sale. He said the rest is history. Got on the Fox River, and that was it. And Ed, thank you. We're lucky to have people like him. We're so dedicated. I'm reminded as I listen to Ken speak about how formative it is in a politician's life, and I'm sure in many of our lives. The people you meet early on, the impressions they create, the kind of standards they set. Well, I was a college kid at Georgetown and ended up being an intern in the office of a U.S. Senator named Paul Douglas. And sitting in Douglas's office as an intern changed my life. I didn't even know at the time. We talked about this as we were driving along, how some things happen. You don't know it's going to change you. It changes you. And Douglas became an inspiration to me to get involved in government and public policy. I never dreamed I'd run for office. And he introduced me to a fellow named Paul Simon. And that's what one thing led to another, and how I happen to be here today. But I remember this great story. Paul Douglas, as some may remember, students of history, was a PhD in economics on the faculty at the University of Chicago, an alderman in the city of Chicago, one of the two non-machine aldermen in the city, who ended up volunteering in World War II to enter the Marine Corps at the age of 50. Went through Parris Island, fought in the South Pacific, got his arm all shot up like Bob Dole did in Okinawa, and dangled by his side. And that's how I ended up being an intern. He insisted on signing every letter. And of course, with one arm, he needed help. And I sat next to him and listened to him. And I remember a story he told so many times, it became kind of emblematic. He used to say, when I was a young man, I just wanted to save the world. When I got a little bit older and was elected to the Senate, I wanted to save the state of Illinois. As I've reached the end of my public career, I just want to save the Indiana Dunes. And if you visit the Indiana Dunes, and some of you have, you'll see that it's the Paul Douglas Visitors Center at the Indiana Dunes. There have been efforts to name the dunes after Douglas, but the Indiana folks don't like that too much. They think that an Illinoisan would have his name on it. I tell you that story because the battle he fought for 2 decades to save the Indiana Dunes was a battle against critics who said it's not the right time. It's not the right time. No member of the Indiana delegation backed Douglas's effort to save the Indiana Dunes. He was on his own. The Chicago senator who loved the dunes. He was fighting the steel mills, he was fighting the oil companies and the refineries, and he got the job done. Now we're going to hear the same refrain when it comes to conservation. It's just not the right time. But it is the right time. It's always the right time to preserve a legacy to leave our children and future generations. And each of us in these generations are challenged to come up with new approaches. Jerry Edelman's here. Thank goodness for open lands and your new approaches that make a difference. The folks that are here for Hackmatack, Sierra Club, all the rest are looking for new approaches in this time and space that make sense. If you go out here, as we did with Ed, and you have all done, I'm sure, and just take a look at this beautiful panorama that God has left for us and challenged us to bring it back to what it once was, you'll know this is our time, and this is a time for us to do it. And we have good support. Senator Mark Kirk joined me in this effort, asking for the support, good bipartisan effort in that regard. Pam Altoff was here earlier, Jack Franks was here earlier. I love that. In a time when there's so little bipartisanship, when it comes to Hackmatack, it's bipartisan, and that's the way it ought to be. So we're going to work together. We're going to build on this great announcement today. We're going to take, incidentally, I'm going to take Ken over to the Indiana Dunes in memory of Paul Douglas tomorrow. But we're going to do this because we know, each of us knows, that we have an obligation to leave something behind that speaks to who we were and what our values were. Thank you.
It's my pleasure to introduce John Wagner, Deputy Director of the Illinois Department of Natural Resources.
Thank you, Elizabeth. So I want to just say a couple of words from the heart about this project called Hackmatack, and I've had a long association with it. But first I want to acknowledge that I'm actually here on behalf of Governor Quinn and Illinois DNR Director Mark Miller, neither of whom could be here today. It's Governor's Day at the State Fair. I think the governor felt he couldn't change the day, and he sure as heck better show up. So he chose the course that he had to choose. But he certainly would want me to reiterate his profound support for this idea of Hackmatack. National Wildlife Refuge. Before America's Great Outdoors, actually, back in 2009, he sent a letter to then Fish and Wildlife Service Director Sam Hamilton saying, there are some locals here, friends of Hackmatack, and they've got a big idea. And I would like you to think about, is this an appropriate thing to do in McHenry County and in southern Wisconsin, in Walworth County in Wisconsin? And of course, then that letter was also accompanied by a later letter authored by Senator Durbin. Thank you, sir, for rallying the delegation on both sides of the state line to get another letter in again to Director Hamilton, reiterating that same request. And of course, it happened, and that's what we're celebrating here today. On behalf of Governor Quinn, I'd like to acknowledge the presence, although they may have left, of Representative Franks and Senator Altoff. They've both been good friends of the DNR and good friends of Hackmatack National Wildlife Refuge, and I want to acknowledge their presence. But on a personal note, I will say that driving up here today, I actually got choked up, and I'm not a very emotive kind of a guy, so I hope I got that all out of my system in the car, and I'll stay on an even keel here. But this is a very powerful moment for me, and I think about conservation traditions, and the Secretary mentioned Teddy Roosevelt. I mean, we're the tip of that spear right here. That goes back to 1903, Pelican Island, where he designated 3 puny acres as the first federal area set aside specifically for wildlife conservation in the United States. And now we're at 150 million acres or something like that, a lot anyway. And we're the leading edge of it. We're carrying on that tradition. It's a very powerful thing and very meaningful to me. And then I think of some of the local traditions, contemporaries of Roosevelt, but here in Chicago, people like Daniel Burnham and Edward Bennett, who co-authored the Plan of Chicago. And what they saw, they were certainly influenced by some of these resource conservation ideas of people like Roosevelt, but they saw the city of Chicago spreading out over the prairies and thought, that's not right. We need to build nature into the fabric of this city called Chicago. And they did that. And they knew it was important for people to have connection to the outdoors and connection to nature. And it seems like that's an idea that we're rediscovering now with the Children in Nature movement and things like that. But they already had that going way back then. And that led to the tradition of forest preserves and conservation districts, and now we have this land base of several 100,000 acres of conservation land. We're going to add to that with the National Wildlife Refuge system. And then finally you fast forward to only about 15 years ago, and a group of conservation and civic leaders hatched this idea called Chicago Wilderness in celebration of this land base devoted to conservation. It was the first attempt where the Chicago area thought like a conservation landscape, not just an urban landscape, but a conservation landscape. How do we knit all these natural areas together in the service of conservation? We produced the Green Infrastructure Vision. Dennis Dreyer is here, one of the primary architects of that vision. It was adopted by the Chicago Metropolitan Area for Planning as the foundation of the Regional Transportation and Land Use Plan. Open space and nature built into the very fabric of a primary planning document for this region. And so I think of all those things as we stand here today and think about how we're carrying on all those traditions. And then just one final last thought, and this goes back only 8 years, and I'm looking at Ed Collins, and he asked a very simple but very profoundly important question of me 8 years ago. He said, why shouldn't we have a national wildlife refuge in the Chicago area? Ed, thank you for asking that question, and thank you all for sharing in this moment today. Appreciate it.
Today, we are here to celebrate a project that had humble beginnings, with a group of conservation-minded citizens sitting around a kitchen table, to now the establishment of the Hackmatack National Wildlife Refuge here in our own backyard. As Secretary Salazar has recognized today, this is a true America's Great Outdoors project through both protecting important migratory bird habitat to providing easy access for an urban population to enjoy and value these natural resources and take action to protect them forever. I'm Lenore Beyer-Clow, Policy Director at Open Lands, and I've had the privilege to be part of this project from many different vantage points. As I look back over the past 8 years, during which this project moved from a dream and a vision of Ed Collins to a reality, I am struck by the collaboration and partnership that were critical and effective to bringing us to where we are today. From the local citizens from both states who formed the Friends of Hackmatack, which my new partners at Fish and Wildlife Service tell me is highly unusual to happen before a refuge has really started. To our elected officials, to my colleagues at local, regional, and national conservation organizations, this is truly a group effort. First, I'd like to thank Senator Durbin for his early leadership and consistent support of the project. He recognized the important work on the ground and focused the attention of U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service on the need to conduct the study and the environmental assessment of the area for a potential refuge. We look forward to his support at the federal level to move this vision of land protection and acquisition and restoration forward. We're also pleased to have the support of our local elected officials who have been here today: Senator Pam Altoff, McHenry County Board Chair Ken Salazar, other county board members, Mary McCann, I believe, is back there, Walworth County Board Chairman Nancy Russell from across the border in Wisconsin, and Lake County Board Chair Ann Main, and Bonnie Thompson-Carter from Lake County. Each of you provided valuable support from a resolution in the Illinois Senate to leadership among county and village officials for the value of this project for conservation, recreation, and for economic development. At each stage, valuable conservation partners have brought important expertise and energy to the project. Open Lands worked every step of the way with Friends of Hackmatack to conduct extensive outreach to generate support among local residents, government agencies, and conservation groups throughout the region. We're also using our expertise in land acquisition to help facilitate this land protection with the IDNR, McHenry County Conservation District, and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. My friend and colleague, Cindy Scrukrud from the Illinois chapter of the Sierra Club, in addition to also working locally, energized a base of support from Sierra Club members, which generated over 2,000 emails to U.S. Fish and Wildlife. And I think at one point jammed their system. The Trust for Public Land through Beth White and their national staff share their experiences with refuges in other parts of the country and also will continue to advocate for Hackmatack in Washington. We are also grateful to the support of over 70 organizations and local groups such as the Environmental Defenders and the Land Conservancy of McHenry County, who is helping move forward private land conservation efforts. As you can see, this area is rich in organizations that have brought us this far, who are committed to Hackmatack in the future. But when it comes down to it, the Hackmatack National Wildlife Refuge is really about people. It is about a place for people to connect to nature. People like my children, who grew up here, and in this very park, have searched for mussels in Nipperson Creek and pulled garlic mustard to restore the landscape. Like people like high school kids from Humboldt Park, who were competing to see how many prairie seeds they could collect. People like the 600 residents who came out to open houses to learn about and support the refuge. And people like you and I, who are thrilled and excited to get national recognition for a landscape which we truly treasure and want to be protected forever. Thank you. So I'm going to now introduce the co-chairs of the Friends of Hackmatack, Margaret Lass-Gardner from Wisconsin, Sherry Pinkram from Illinois.
Hello. I'm Margaret Lass-Gardner. I'm the co-chair of the Friends of Hackmatack Steering Committee. Today is a good day for the planet. Hackmatack Wildlife Refuge, encompassing land in Illinois and Wisconsin, is one step closer to becoming a reality. I have been involved in trying to get this refuge established since 2009, but this committee's rich history goes back much further to 2004. I thank the original committee members for having the foresight to recommend a bi-state refuge. The pebble they dropped in the pool has rings which circle out to encompass so many people from both states. Thanks to all the Wisconsin and Illinois residents and organizations who have voiced support as well. I am a 10-year transplant from Illinois. I have gone from being a Lake Geneva summer person to a full-time resident on a small farm in Walworth County, through which the Nipperson Creek flows. I am an artist, and I have long found inspiration in the rolling glacial landscape of southeast Wisconsin. I am particularly fond of the oaks, savannas, and meadows. Every fall, huge flocks of sandhill cranes and geese making their way south stop at Peterkin Pond, the jewel of the Wisconsin portion of Hackmatack, which is just about a mile as the crow flies from my home. And I have long been sure that another reason to come to the Lake Geneva region, such as Hackmatack, would be a great economic boon to the area. In the words of Nancy Russell, it's an economic no-brainer. Working to establish the refuge has been a way I could help give back to this beautiful place. This committee has been a stimulating and dear group to me, from which I have learned a lot. Our Illinois co-chair, Sherry Pickram, is an original member and fifth-generation resident of the area. Her experiences and observations of life in this part of northern Illinois have been a priceless addition to our store of knowledge as we have moved forward. Sherry and I, along with the entire steering committee, applaud Secretary's authorization of this project, and we look forward to a future in which lots of our beautiful and rare landscapes are preserved. I'd also like to introduce who has some historical documentation as gifts for our guests.
Yeah, Senator Durbin and Secretary Salazar, I know you're used to giving awards, but we have some homemade packets for you. And I would like, real quickly, the Steering Committee of Friends of Hackmatack to wander up here. Lenore Byerclough, Steve Byers, Ed Collins, Audrey Denicky, Margaret Les Gardner, Sherry Pickram, Penny Rohrer, Sarah Schuster, Cindy Screwcrud, Tom Von Gelgren, and myself. And we would like to particularly thank Senator Durbin for coming in early and often. It's been wonderful. And it also includes our videos there, which are only either 4 minutes long or 1.5 minutes long, depending on your time frame.
My attention span.
Secretary Salazar, we have a packet for you also, and you're going to treasure it and enjoy it. And Director Woolley, we made a packet for you also. And then there's one thing that we do want to do, and we'd be remiss. We learned how wonderful the federal government can be. And, considering what you hear nowadays, we just want to say that our experience with Senator Durbin's office, with the Department of Interior, with Fish and Wildlife Service, has been phenomenal. You have made us feel part of a whole national conservation movement, and we have to call out to your Region 3 office people, Tom Larson, and Matt Springer. Come on up, Come on up, Tom.
Come on, Tom. Matt.
And then lastly, all of you people, we all want to thank you for making this happen.
Very good. Thank you.
Don't leave yet.
Now we're moving around, not moving each other.
Great job, sir. We're honored, sir. And it was pointed to Samson.
We knew this would happen. No, this is fantastic. Fantastic. We'll have a lot of celebration.
All of that, hopefully, attention. I saw the map.
Lots of different projects here in the United States that I've worked on, so a lot.
It's a $350 million deal. It's a small world in some ways, right? Richard's brother went to Catholic seminary.
Thank you. Thank you. Good. Now that you're not
Right down there.
How many of you?
Those two gentlemen were a lot of fun. Very, very down-to-earth people.
There were so many years of preparation leading to today. When Secretary Salazar announced that this was the 557th National Wildlife Refuge, I could just feel the crowd, surging forward in appreciation for all their work being recognized at the highest levels of conservation. It's a beautiful piece of real estate, a beautiful piece of God's creation. Thank goodness the local folks are willing to step up to save it.
It's a great day for Hackmatack, for Illinois and Wisconsin, because this is a great example for all the rest of America on how a community came together to save a very special place in our planet.